It's exactly 8:24 a.m. and we now have the Executive Director of For South Africa Freedom of Religion, and here's Michael Swain talking about the final reminder of the PEPUDA bill. Michael, good morning. Welcome to the program. Can you hear me? I think your mic is off, Michael. Do you just want to check that you've switched it on?
I think I have. Sorry, I was saying good morning to you and good morning to your listeners, Julie, and thank you for having me on the show.
My pleasure entirely. So you're here to talk to us about the final reminder of the PEPUDA Amendment Bill. Today is the close of date. What does the petitions look like? Have we received a gazillion signatures?
Well, we've had a tremendous response from across the faith community, and Freedom of Religion South Africa, 4SA, we are a legal advocacy group. And when we saw the PEPUDA Amendment Bill and we looked at what it would, we believe, mean to the religious faith community of South Africa generally, and the very serious erosion of our religious freedom rights, we then almost sounded the alarm and said we need, as the faith community, to make our voices heard. And that's what you do by sending in a submission. And there is still today to send one in. And we recommend that you go, if nowhere else, to the forsa.org.za website and then just click on the link there. But the PEPUDA Amendment Bill has had a great response. I heard yesterday the counter was on one platform up to 73,500 submissions. I was informed by another traditional African spirituality religious grouping that they had assembled 63,000 submissions. And so I know the Islamic community has been very, very engaged in this matter too. So we are hoping that we will literally have a voice like a megaphone to speak to government and to say, we do not want to live with laws in this country which will fundamentally undermine and remove our ability, our freedom to live out our faith as we would want to live it out according to the tenets of our faith. And that, we believe, is a fundamental human right, and we need to stand up for those to make sure that our voices are heard.
Michael, what sort of numbers are you looking at in terms of government considering scrapping the bill? 100,000, millions of signatures. Is there some sort of a cut-off figure?
Well, I think that, to be honest with you, the submissions that have been made on this particular bill will be unprecedented in their number. I don't believe that, in my experience, any bill will have had the number of submissions that this bill will have received. So that already will tell you that this is a very loud pushback against what government is proposing. Obviously, this is a democratic process, and we do live in a democracy. So government must consider every submission and take it into account. And so when they look at what they're going to do next, in other words, what are they going to do? Are they going to simply press on and ignore all the submissions? Well, if they do that, then there's a very strong constitutional law case which can say to government, you cannot do this. You cannot, even in terms of your own laws, just simply ignore the democratic process. So we do believe that this voice has loudly and clearly said to government that we do not want this amendment to come into law. Once it's in law, of course, it is not only enforced, but it is enforceable. And the unintended consequences, perhaps, could be absolutely dire, because activists are given, according to this bill, access to state legal aid so that they can bring actions against, and I think, unfortunately, it will be particularly people of faith who will then find themselves in the crosshairs of litigation. And then you will have to defend yourself with your money. And of course, if you don't win, then you can face penal sanctions. And we're talking about fines in the millions of rands.
Sure. Okay. We've covered the PEPUDA bill in much detail. My colleague Inayat Wadi as well had panel discussions on this issue. But for those people possibly listening and watching us for the first time, just give us a brief explanation or outline as to what this bill contains. You also talk about activist groups who can then take legal action, very especially against religious bodies. And I'm now thinking, what sort of legal action on what grounds? So can you respond to all of that, please?
Well, yes, what it does is it drastically expands the definition of discrimination. So discrimination, you cannot be unfairly discriminated against or discriminated against, not necessarily unfairly, because you can have fair discrimination. But the grounds would be things like age and race and sex and religion, sexual orientation would be one of them, pregnancy. There are multiple, I think there's 17 different factors. But that has been now increased, expanded in this bill to say that even if you are caused prejudice, or you feel that you've been caused prejudice, or somehow your dignity has been undermined, even if no intentionality is there, so even if you didn't intend to discriminate against somebody, once you've shown that you have been discriminated against, and as I say, it's highly subjective, then it is deemed to be unfair. And now you must now show that it is fair, but you won't be able to do that simply by saying, well, this is simply something that I'm doing or saying as a consequence of my sincerely held beliefs and faith convictions. Because if you have undermined their dignity in the test, if they can show that the context in which the discrimination has taken place is something which is biased against them, if they can show that they have suffered from previous patterns of disadvantage, all those things will basically stop you from proving or showing that the discrimination that you have made against them or in what you've said or done is fair. And so you can see the net is very broad. And also, even if you have caused somebody or encouraged somebody else to discriminate, then you're going to be caught in the net. So an imam, for example, might be preaching a message, and somebody takes that message and they act upon it, but somebody else feels they've somehow been prejudiced by it or their dignity's been undermined by it. Then not only the person who is now accused of the discrimination will be in trouble, but so will the imam, because he's the one who will have caused or encouraged it. And even the mosque, because he's employed presumably by the mosque or by a committee running the mosque, they are also liable as the employers unless they have actively prevented the discrimination. So the net is incredibly broad. And literally, it means that you'll never know what's going to happen. I mean, the hammer can fall at any time on you. And we don't believe we should live in a nation whereby we always have to be looking over our shoulders simply because we've expressed our sincerely held faith convictions.
It actually flies in the face of this amazing constitution that we have in this country, does it not? It almost clashes with our constitutional rights, I should imagine. But on the other hand, you can understand people who have been discriminated for whatever reason all these years, wanting this bill to go through. But what frightens me about this bill is how subjective it is and how difficult it will be for you to prove your case at your cost. A religious institution, for example, you could have said something in total innocence and not even applied your mind to the issue, and you find yourself being taken to court for defamation or whatever else, or for discrimination. It's that dangerous, is it not?
You're 100% right. And let's also remember that PEPUDA, which is the promotion of the promotion of equality and the prevention of unfair discrimination act, is already in force. So there are already substantial protections for you to not experience discrimination on any ground. This is now almost simply expanding that to such an extent that it almost becomes weaponized. And we're concerned that it becomes weaponized, particularly against people of faith. And particularly, by the way, because also part of the amendments give government the right to basically pass regulations and codes of practice on any institution to eliminate, to make sure that they force you as an institution or as a faith group even to abide by what is now their definition of equality. So they can literally interfere at a micro level. And in the same bill, there is a duty upon you to basically make sure that you also are applying these same standards to your faith. So we just see it as a complete overreach. Now, here's the problem. Yes, it is unconstitutional. We are persuaded and convinced of that. But when something comes into law, it is in force and enforceable until it is repealed or until the Constitutional Court says it is unconstitutional. But that can take years. And so in the meantime, you're living in this regime, if you like, where you can be severely impacted by it, even though it might turn out to be unlawful, but you still suffer the consequences in the meantime.
What I'm wondering is when, how this was initiated. Was there a particular incidence recently for this to be re-looked at. I do know, and I'm not sure if this falls under the PEPUDA bill, but I do know there's been issues at schools by white teachers against black learners for their hair, the way they wear their hair, etc., and just outright discrimination and discriminatory comments against black pupils. So I'm wondering if that is not where it all started, or something else, perhaps. Are you aware of it?
Yes, I am aware of that. And I'm also aware of the army major who was told to remove her Islamic headdress at one point.
That's
and
right.
That
yes.
also had to be fought. And we were also speaking out against that, because that was also under PEPUDA, a discriminatory act. And so, yes, there have been discriminatory acts, and there are very strong laws that actually prevent discrimination from taking place. Even crime and injuria, which is a criminal action, which you might recall Penny Sparrow and Vicky Momberg, who made horrible remarks. They were also found guilty under the criminal act of crime and injuria for fundamentally undermining somebody's human dignity. So these are in place. Where this comes from is difficult to say, and why it was so sudden, and also why there was such an urgency. I mean, it was introduced just before the Easter Ramadan Eid festival season on the 26th of March. So literally right before all those major religious holidays and festivals, and only 30 days were given for comment initially. And when we appealed that and we said it should be the 30th of June, and fortunately we prevailed in that, they said, no, we need to deal with this as a matter of urgency. But why the urgency? It really doesn't make sense. So okay. I'm very glad pushed back.
We'll have to leave it there, Michael. Very quickly, how do people still object or, hand in their signatures to this issue at this 11th hour? What do we do?
The easiest way, go to the forsa.org.za website. You click a link, it takes you to a neutral platform called Dear South Africa. And within a couple of clicks, it literally takes 2 minutes to make your voice heard, and every voice counts. So we want literally to see the last minute, if you like, new wave of objections. So government clearly hears, no, the faith community of South Africa is not happy.
Thank you indeed. Lovely talking to you. And I do know that this will go through with all of the efforts you guys have put in. It's exactly 9:36.